mystery theory. Today, I am sharing with you kind of a longer case, and I am still fighting my asthma, so I hope that it will be still okay for you. Otherwise, I still have to go, and it's going to take me a while to get better. I just know my lungs hate me. But before I share today's case, I wanted to ask you for a favor, and if you could please like this video and leave me a comment. I would truly appreciate that. It could be an emoji. It could be what you think about this case. Just say hello. Let me know if you're new. Your interaction in this video helps my channel with the algorithm and shares this content with more people that are looking for true crime in an ASMR style. So thank you for that. You have no idea the difference that you're making. I also want to remind you there's a new video on Patreon, so please go check that out. Each and every one of you there make this possible for YouTube and this extra content. So thank you. Now, today's case started on October night in the year 1958, and it involves Carl Eder, who was 15 years old at the time, and he was throwing a rope out of his second story bedroom window. He was pretty sneaky and climbed down and vanished into the night in the dark suburb of Rochester, New York. Now, Carl, every time I say that name, I see Rick Grimes saying, Carl. Oh gosh. If you ever watch The Walking Dead, you probably know what I mean, but go back to this Carl. He spent the next month hitchhiking his way across country, and he ended up in the San Diego area. Our friend Carl was the child of a first generation German immigrant. was 6'4", but still not old enough to work where he wanted. So he crossed the border into Tijuana, Mexico. There he found a place where he could buy a fake ID and called himself in that paperwork Charles Harrison. So with that in hand, he went back to San Diego. Even then, he couldn't find a job. So he slept in a coat closet in the Mission Beach ballroom. And that's where he met Tom Pendergast, who was 39 years old. Tom was a religious man, and when he was younger, he spent some time in a reform school. Apparently, he was caught stealing a car and taking it for a joyride. So after that experience, he made it his life's mission to help boys find their way in life and avoid a life of crime. He already had tried to help other boys, 4 of them. He brought them into his home in El Cajon, which is east of San Diego, and introduced him to his wife and children. He fed them, gave them a place to sleep, and helped them find work. But it not always worked out. There was this one boy that robbed him, and he never seen him again. But he believed that God had this task for him, so he didn't care, and Tom kept helping other boys. So on a stormy Southern California night, which is not as common as you think, Tom was driving home from work, and when he spotted Carl, he was hitchhiking on the side of the highway. He felt sorry for the kid and knew that he was probably homeless and in need of help, so he offered him a ride. The boy introduced himself as the name that he used in his fake ID, Charles Harrison. And by the end of the drive, Tom invited the kid to his family home for dinner and a place to sleep for the night. The family was excited to receive this new member that they called Charles. They were gonna let him stay in a cottage that they had on their property. This was while he looked for work. Tom's wife made dinner every night for Charles, which we know it's Carl. Tom and their 4 young children, Diane, Alan, Thomas Jr., and David. 6 weeks passed. He wasn't able to find a job. So during the day, he would sit at home while Tom's wife watched after the 2 youngest children. And Tom worked as an aircraft mechanic. And the other older boys were in school. In the early afternoon of December 15, 1958, Carl, I'm gonna call him Carl, or we're gonna get all mixed up, was annoyed with the 4-year-old Diane. She was being hyper and wanted to play. But he told her that it was time to take a nap. Of course, Diane didn't like that idea. She started jumping on the bed and around the room and screaming. But Carl had had enough. He grabbed the girl and threw her to the floor. But when her head hit the floor, it cracked her skull. So she was killed instantly. The mom, Louise Pendergast, ran into the room and screamed, "You killed her." Carl was in panic and he ran to the garage where he kept his suitcase, grabbed his pistol and put shells in it. He then ran back into the house and shot 2 warning shots into the wall. Mrs. Pendergast was screaming, so he shot her in the left side of her chest. As she lay on the floor, he put the gun to her left temple and shot again. I mean, this is quickly escalating out of control. He went back into the garage, grabbed a hunting knife, returned to the house, and found 2-year-old Alan screaming on the floor. He took the knife and slashed his throat, and then slashed the throat of Diane, who was already dead, to make sure she was dead. Carl pulled Diane and Alan's, which are the kids' bodies, into the bathroom, put one on top of the other, and then dragged Mrs. Pendergast's body into the room and laid her He waited for the older boys to come back from school. Thomas was home first, and he was 6 years old. Carl grabbed him, but he escaped and ran into the garage. You have to understand that he was no match for such a big guy like Carl. So he caught Thomas in the garage bathroom and slit his throat. And this was even more crazy. I mean, he disemboweled him. Soon after, 9-year-old David walked in the front door to find a knife at his throat. Carl sliced his throat and cut his torso from his navel to his breastplate. Left the 5 bodies in the house and walked out the front door. Sat on the front steps and waited for Tom to get home from work. When Tom got home, Carl didn't give him time to exit the vehicle. He pointed his pistol at him, got in the passenger side of the car, and told him to drive. For 2 hours, Carl forced Tom to drive randomly without telling him what had happened to his family. When they reached the Mission Beach area, Carl told Tom to stop at a gas station and force him into the men's bathroom at gunpoint. He asked him to take off his clothes, and Carl removed his own as well. He then took Tom's clothes, but at that point, Tom attacked him and wrestled the gun away from him. Carl fled out of the bathroom door and ran down an alley. Tom thought he was lucky that he escaped, but he didn't know what was waiting for him back home. He first found his oldest, David, then wife and 2 youngest children. Tom was screaming and lifting his wife's body. He cradled her in his arms and cried. Lastly, he found Thomas in the garage. By the time the police arrived, Tom was crying in the front yard, covered in blood and in shock. But he told the police about Carl, who he knew as Charles Harrison. Police didn't even know if they believed this story. Tom had the gun, and he was covered in blood. The story seemed too extreme to be true. But they did notice that his clothes were too big for him. Tom was only 5'10", and Carl was 6'4". So they thought there was some truth to the story, but we're not convinced just yet. They put out an alert. They were looking for the suspect that was described by Tom. They also knew that he was going to be wearing Tom's clothes, and that his pants would have been too short for him. Tom was taken to the psychiatric ward. They were afraid he'd be suicidal. When the doctors cleared him, he was taken to the police station where he was taking multiple lie detector tests. And he kept saying the same thing. Quote, "I was trying to save a soul." After 7 hours of interrogation, they believed his story and stepped up the search for Carl. They searched the canyons on horseback and in helicopters. Volunteers and lots of tips that were receiving from the public. Apparently, they believed that Carl probably have crossed the border again and that he escaped into Mexico. They believed that maybe he was taking another family hostage in the area. And they did hundreds of door-to-door searches looking for him. They did find his bloody t-shirt about a mile from the gas station. 3 days after the murder, Carl was in Mission Beach, and he was trying to hide from the authorities. Apparently, he bought a loaf of bread and a hamburger without being recognized. But when a man saw him walking in front of his house, he instantly recognized him. Now, apparently the man ran next door to his friend's house, who was a police officer, and the officer in his pajamas got into his bicycle and rode he was sure. And he said, "You are Carl Adder." And then he finally confessed and said, "Yes, I am." Tom was at the police station when Carl was arrested. Tom yelled, "Why did you do it? Why did you do it?" And after a brief silence, Carl replied, "I didn't want to, Tom." When he was questioned by police, he admitted to killing the family. He said that the noise of the kids annoyed him, that something flipped in him. He gave details of how he butchered each member of the family. But when he asked why he didn't kill Tom, he replied, "I didn't want to kill him. He was really good to me." He was tried as an adult, even though he was 16 years old. He was not eligible for the death penalty. He initially pleaded innocent, but then changed to guilty because of how convenient it was for him. At sentencing, his lawyer explained his client was ready to start a treatment, hoping for some leniency to the sentence. But in the end, he got 5 life sentences, 3 concurrent sentences, and 2 consecutive. He would be eligible for parole after only 7 years. As he left the courthouse, Tom said to him, "Rest in peace there, Carl. Remember that." Tom said, and I agree, that he should never be released. That he would never be excused for killing his wife and 4 children because of any mental condition. He didn't believe it was true. He believed that Carl was just wicked, and that it was all premeditated. Tom knew that Carl didn't feel any kind of remorse. So it's not so much that he couldn't explain what he did for, mental illness reasons, but he never believed that he had any. Now Carl spent the next 15 years moving from prison to prison throughout the California Department of Correction. At one point, he was a few cells down from the notorious glamour girl slayer Harvey Klapman. In the year 1971, he was sent to the California Correctional Institution security prison with a population of 1,200 inmates. He was allowed the freedom to work outside of the prison without supervision. He had been working on a farm for 3 years without incident. But one day, he vanished. In October of the year 1974, when he was 32 years old, this is when all this happened. I was working at this farm, completely unsupervised, and he just walked away. People at the farm didn't notice initially, and when they did, nobody had seen him for about 75 minutes. He was wearing his prison denims, but he was on the run. Prison officials searched his cell. They found a note that said, quote, "I've done enough time and I'm leaving." Apparently, while in jail, he had contact with several extremist groups, including white supremacists, outlaw motorcycle groups, Pendergast Brigade, and more. It's believed that any of these groups could have been involved in assisting his escape. Throughout the years, authorities tried to locate Carl. He was even featured on America's Most Wanted, offering a $20,000 reward. But he seemed to have completely disappeared. There were some reports that he was spotted in Calistoga and St. Helena, California, but police can never find him. And I mean, right now he'd be 80 years old, something like that. But police believe that he either left the country or that he was killed by one of his own extremist groups. Now, this is one of those cases that really makes my skin crawl. I can't understand the leniency for this kid when he did such a horrific, thing. It wasn't one, but the children, the 4 children, the mother, then the father are taken. I just can't understand why the court was so nice to this person. And once again, leaving a monster free to roam. his friends passing by the state, and it was a good thing. I mean, all I'm trying to say is I know that those programs work. I know that given the opportunity to some of these people, it's a good thing, and most of them got in trouble for, you know, credit card things and fraud and maybe theft, drug related, but they would never send a murderer to work there. And I mean, a guy that's able to do this to an entire family, I can't understand. So I'm not against the program of rehabilitation to prisoners. I think it's a good thing. I've experienced it myself and my husband for over, 15 years. And it's a great program that gives a second chance to some young guys that, are paying for what they did, but at the same time trying to reintegrate after they serve their time. So I don't know if I'd be okay with the idea of letting a criminal go to work when you know what in this case he was capable of. But feel free to disagree with me. I completely understand that we all think differently, and share your thoughts please in the comments down below. Thank you so much for being here today, for your support, your kind words, your comments, your likes. They mean the world to me. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm gonna go because I've been having to stop this video recording for a while every few minutes because I'm coughing my lungs out. So I hope it wasn't too annoying. But today's case was interesting